Hello everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IAS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh, XNDA 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012, and I welcome you on the platform. Now over here, have you ever wondered that when it comes to fire is actually aligned with the destruction, but at the same time can the fire can be constructive as well, or when it comes to fire, why is it essential for the India's grassland? That is what we'll be talking about in today's session. Now, when it comes to the grasslands, they are termed as the wasteland. And again, that is one of the major problems that leads to the problems in conservation of the grasslands in India as well. Also, when it comes to fire is quite essential. And ultimately, this term or the name, the fire that has been given to a newly discovered species as well. Now, when it comes to the complete news, it was on 3rd of July 2026 at Cecil in Pune that there were the botanists which were there from IICR Pune and also from the Savannah Science Foundation. They have confirmed a new plant species which is living on the fire-prone hillside in Maharashtra. Now, the species that we are talking about is basically a dwarf herb which is barely 10 centimeter tall with the winged stems and the white flowers as well. Now, this species has been named as Canscora Agni, where the Agni, it means actually the fire. And over here, the name is the deliberate act of the science communication. That is to challenge the assumption that every fire is a disaster. Now, over here, it is also very important to note that without the periodic natural fire, the woody shrubs basically they invade the open savanna and shade out the ground layer. And ultimately, species like we have sea Agni, they already are found at the single location. They disappear even before they are studied, and therefore researchers they have recommended that it should be classified as critically endangered because this had been found only at a very limited geographical location that we are talking. Now over here it is very important that if you are studying for or you are preparing for the civil service in 2027, 28 or 29. So we have the GS Foundation batch, that is Resolution P2I batch, which will be starting from today or from 7th of July. So ultimately you can enroll into this batch by using the code that is BRS Live for the maximum discount that you will get. Now over here it is very important that this complete scenario or the complete concept is basically what we termed as the ecological succession. Now when it comes to ecological succession, it is very important that this is how we have the succession that happens on the piece of land, and the ecological succession can be of different types. Now when it comes to the ecological succession, we can have the succession which could be termed as primary or it could be termed as secondary as well. Now in the primary succession, what happens is that this is on the bare rock or the bare sand or where we have no soil, and ultimately the primary succession is the way how the forests they grow on the newer lands, and ultimately this is quite slow and it takes hundreds of years. At the same time, there is secondary succession as well, that is on the soil after there had been any kind of disturbance. Like for example, there had been forest fire, there had been flood or farming. So afterwards, after the forest had been threatened and ultimately this had been degraded. So over here when we have the new forest that grows, so that is called as the secondary succession, and this is quite faster. Then there is also succession that is based upon the habitat where we have the forests which are going. Like for example, there is hydrarch or the hydrosphere that starts when the water, where we have the pond, then it turns into the marshes, and then later on it actually converts into the forested land. Then also we have xerarch or xerosia, which starts on the dry rocks or the sands, where we have the lichens which grow first, which then converts into mosses, and then we have the forest. Or it could be also halosphere, where it is in the saline areas where we have the marshes, and ultimately we have the mangroves which grows that turns into the salt marshes. Now, the ecological succession, it could also be based on the drivers. Like for example, there is autogenic, which is caused by the organisms which are modifying the environment. Like the lichens, they make the soil, and the allogenic kind of the ecological succession, which is actually caused by the external factors, like for example, the flood and the fires. And these are the different modes of the ecological succession that is there. Now over here, there are the two kinds of the fire keepers that we are talking about in Maharashtra. There is the field botanist where we have the Ashish and Narlekar and Sharad S. Kamble. They have spent over a decade walking old growth savannas before they could prove that sea agni was new to the science. And this was patient, unglamorous field work that they have undertaken. And this is what the policy never sees. At the same time, there is the pastoral community as well. We have Dhangad shepherds. They are of the they live in the Deccan Plateau region, and they have grazed and periodically burned these grasslands for generation. But right now, the major problem is that the traditional fire and grazing regime, they had been now criminalized as the forest offense under the modern fire suppression rules that are there, because the modern rules, they treat the fire as the basic problem. Also, there is the silent casualty. We are talking about Great Indian Bustard, where it is the state bird of Rajasthan, and it nests directly open in the open grassland floor. So when fire is suppressed and shrubs, they take over. So its habitat, its eggs, and even its flight paths, they are all put at the risk simultaneously and at the same time. Now, when it comes to the colonial, rules, so there were the colonial rules that were made, and ultimately the British foresters, they trained only to value the close canopy timber forest, label India's open grasslands as a wasteland. And ultimately, they have pushed these regions to cultivation or plantation on them as well. Now, over here, it is very important that there is the reserve forest model that began in 1908, where areas like Kaziranga, they were notified as the reserve forest, and the grassland fire, that becomes something to be managed by the state rather than that had to be practiced by the communities. Then also, we had the Forest Conservation Act that was passed in 1980. Now, this Forest Conservation Act actually protects the forest land, and we do not have the similar kind of the arrangement that is for the grassland. So it does not protect the savanna grasslands, and that is again a kind of a problem that we have while managing the grasslands in India. Also, there is the Green Nation Mission era that was started in 2000 and till 2020s. So over here, the Green India Mission and the Campa Fund Afforestation that were taken at the scale, including the natural grasslands, which were actually mapped as the degraded lands, and there were the plantations, the forest plantations that were carried out at these regions. Then in 2020 to 2026, there was the Supreme Court ruling that was there on the Great Indian Bustard. Even new species like sea Agni and the state resolution, like for example with Maharashtra, that have started treating the grassland as a distinct ecosystem that is worth the protection as well. So over here, it is very important to understand these concepts. We have the open natural ecosystem, or ONE, where we have grasslands, we have savannas, and the deserts. They are actually naturally open, and they are not degraded forest, and they had been coined to correct the decades of the forest biased mapping. And over here now, global bodies, they are pushing that India must it should include the ONEs separately from the forest into the complete inventory of the natural vegetation. Now, there is a pyrophilic or the fire adapted species as well. Like, for example, we have plants and the animals like sea Agni, whose life cycle actually depends upon the periodic fire. So over here, we have the seeds that need heat to germinate, or the roots that resprout after the burning. And that explains why zero fire policy, it itself is a cause of the biodiversity loss that we can see. And there is the woody encroachment. What happens is that when fire and grazing, they are removed, so shrubs and the trees, they actually invade the cover, converting the savanna into the scrub land or into the forest as well, and squeezed out the grass obligate species. And this is the central mechanism behind the habitat loss of the Great Indian Bustard. And there is disturbance dependent climax as well, where it is basically a stable end state ecosystem that needs recurring disturbance. So over here, we have fire or grazing that must persist into the ecosystem. That contradicts the old idea that the climax community, that is the later on the forest, they are always mean to be untouched forest. And again, this is the region where you will be asked a question in your GS paper 3, and again important for your prelims as well. Now over here, we are talking about a flower which had been named after the fire, and this is Canscora Agni in 2026. This is a scientific turning point where peer-reviewed taxonomic description that deliberately encodes a conservation argument into the species scientific name. And ultimately, that have turned the nomenclature itself into advocacy for the fire positive management of the savannas, and they had been recommended the status of this species to be included into critically endangered category. Now, also there had been a legal turning point. We had the MK Ranjit Singh versus Union of India case in 2021, where the Supreme Court had banned new overhead power lines across nearly about 99,000 square kilometers of the Great Indian Bustard grassland habitat in Rajasthan and in Gujarat. Now, in 2024, there was a modification where the blanket undergrounding recalled as the impractical, and there was an expert committee that balances the Great Indian Bustard survival with the renewable energy corridors. And over here, it has said that the grassland restoration is the core remedy for protecting the Great Indian Bustard, the species that is again under the threat of extinction. Now, over here, it is very important that this is only what we are seeing right now, but it is more beyond that, more beyond what what just meets our eyes. Because ultimately, this is about ecological dimension, where the fire, it recycles the nutrients, break the seed dormancy, and prevents a single successional stage, that is forest, from erasing the another, that is the grassland. This is also about the governance dimension, where the land is classified by the revenue logic. That is, it has been classified as wasteland. But at the same time, it is that the ecological logic has not been taken into consideration, which creates the legal blind spot that no single ministry owns. Also, there is the social cultural dimensional as well, where there is the pastoralist fire and grace traditions, like we have Dhangar, Gujjar type practices which are there, which had been criminalized, even when they sustain the very ecosystem officials they want to protect through the various environmental laws. And there is also climate energy dimension, where the grasslands are the prime real estate for the solar and the wind projects. Over here, it is very important that pitting the green energy directly against the grassland biodiversity is quite harmful, as it has been shown in the Great Indian Bustard case. Now, over here, this is very important because ultimately you will see that when it comes to Kaziranga, so every Feb to March, there is the Kaziranga's staff which actually conducts the scientifically controlled burning of the tall grass. Now, this actually improves the visibility of the anti-poaching patrols, and also there is regeneration of the nutritious new shoots for the rhino and the deer to eat. There's also over here Maharashtra, there had been the shift of the policy, where the state government resolution now directs that the afforestation drives, they will avoid the natural grasslands and the wetlands, which is a rare instance of the policy catching up with the ecology right now. And this has to be, recalibrated, and also has to be implemented all over India also. Now, there are bird studies on the plantation in New Maharashtra. The research over here, it shows that afforestation that is on the old growth savanna displaces the grassland specialist bird into the favor of the woodland species. And this is the hard evidence behind the tree planting. Then there is a GIB committee report that was there, which is basically Supreme Court mandated expert committee, which continues to balance the undergrounding of the power lines with the restoration of the grassland and jumpstart captive breeding across the Gujarat and Rajasthan for the protection of the Great Indian Bustard. Now, over here, it is not only about India. In India, it is about the colonial wasteland legacy and the fire suppression, along with the afforestation that dominate, which is basically the kind of the policy that we are following in restoration of the forest in India. Because ultimately, the forest policy, it asks that there should be 33% of the land area that should be covered with the forest. But at the same time, there is court correction now through the courts and the states. Basically, there is not a national law that is related to this, which is the need of the hour. Then there is Sub-Saharan Africa, where the savanna fire ecology well is recognized in the conservation science. Like, for example, you can see in Kruger, Serengeti, where the controlled burning is standard integrated park management, and ultimately this is not an exception in Sub-Sahara. There is in Australia, where there is the Aboriginal cultural burning or the fire stick farming, formally reintegrated into the land management after the decades of suppression, which actually worsened the catastrophic wildfire as well. So this is very important because ultimately this gives the lesson to India that when it comes to the fire, all right, so fire is the best treated as a scheduled management tool under the scientific supervision, and it is not a kind of tragedy or the emergency to be universally extinguished, and ultimately the fire, it can be useful too as well. Now, what could be the future course of action that the India can take? So over here, it is very important that we have to replace the colonial era revenue classification with the ecological survey data distinguishing the tree degraded land from the natural open ecosystems. Also, the grasslands, they still lack the equivalent of the Forest Conservation Act. So this is a gap that had been flagged repeatedly by the researchers, by the conservationists, and even the policy analysts as well. There has to be the environmental impact assessment that should be done, and also the Gram Sabha consent should be taken where there is any grassland that is diverted for the infrastructure or for the plantation as well. And also there has to be standardized indicators for biodiversity, for the carbon storage, for the fodder capacity and hydrology, so that the hydrology, the productivity, it can be measured, or it is measured ecologically and not just economically, terming the grasslands as the wasteland. And also, we should scale the Kaziranga style, scientific controlled birding as a recognized funded habitat management tool across the grassland protected areas which are there. And thereby, this is quite important. Now, I guess this is very much clear to every one of you why the fire, which is termed as dangerous, it could be also conservative, and there could be conservative approach for protecting the grasslands ultimately. So that would be all in this session. I hope that this issue is clear to every one of you. I will see you in the next video. But till then, please take care of yourself. And even if you are preparing for the civil services for 2027, 28 or 29, then you can enroll into the Resolution P2I batch, which is based on the SMART model, where you get the structured classes, you get the mentorship, you get the assessment, the revision, and the test series as well. All of this had been integrated into a single platform where you are getting all of this combinedly. That is quite necessary for your holistic approach towards your preparation. Now, over here, you can enroll into this batch, and for the discount, you can use the code BRS Live. That is the code that will fetch you the maximum discount onto the platform. And that would be all. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here. But do not forget to like the session, to share the session with your friends, and even subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed it yet. And even comment down in the comment box and let me know that what is the best aspect of this video that you have liked. So that would be all. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care and Jai Hind.